dope track. The vibes is real nice, everything is real fat. You don't have to do work, we do that. It's the type of place where you can wear your hat, just relax and just hear a dope track. The vibes is real nice, everything is real fat. You don't have to do work, we do that.
It is 10:38, February 25th, 2025. And that would make it, what is it? That would make it 4:38 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, USA. And yeah, it looks very, very interesting right about now. It appears that this press conference sounds very, very different. And I wonder, what is it that Macron was able to get Trump to see that he couldn't see before? I'm curious about that. What is it Macron knows that I don't know. It seemed that Trump had an attitude change. Could it be that he is flipping on Putin? Why would he? And if that's the case, why would he flip on Putin? Why would he? I don't know. But folks, you tell me what you think. Let's see here.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Great honor to be here with my friend.
With my friend. Did you hear that? We're like, what is up? Did he just call him his friend? Is that what he just did? That is very interesting.
Here. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Great honor to be here with my friend.
Very
I'm
different.
delighted to welcome President Macron back to the White House. We've been together quite often, but not that often in the White House. We honored the President, First Lady of France, not so long ago. There was a beautiful evening, and we will not soon forget it. That was a beautiful day and evening, and many fond memories. I also want to thank Emmanuel for hosting me in Paris last December after a historic election win to witness the reopening of the spectacular.
He really likes Macron. I wonder what this is about.
The Notre Dame Cathedral, where you did an outstanding job in bringing it back together. That was a sad
He acknowledged someone else's good work. What is happening here?
day watching that burn. And 5 years later, you had it up, and it was, they say, more beautiful than it was before. So I think it's a great achievement. That was not easy.
More beautiful than it was before.
France
What
is
flattery.
America's oldest ally. Our cherished partnership has been a force for freedom, prosperity, and peace from the very beginning. We're now working on some very interesting developments. One in particular, as you know, the war between Russia and Ukraine. In the American Revolution, French support helped us to seize our destiny as an independent nation. In the First and Second World Wars, our citizens shed blood together on the battlefields of Europe. And I'll never forget joining President Macron 6 years ago on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was some day. The purpose of our meeting today is to end another battle, a really horrible one, a war, something that we haven't seen since the Second World War, that is ravaging European soil, the deadliest and most destructive conflict that one can imagine. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellite photos, and lots of other photos. And
This is a very different Trump. This is a very agreeable Trump. Very interesting.
it's a horrible thing that's happening. Thousands of people are dying a week. This very day is the third anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine, which would never have happened if I was president. That was not going to happen. The horrors of this gruesome and bloody war can scarcely be overestimated. Hundreds of thousands of people, Russians and Ukrainians in particular, have needlessly died.
Whatever happened to Russia would have never did it if Ukraine didn't want to join NATO.
An entire generation of Ukrainians and Russian men has been decimated. 1,000 100-year-old cities have been turned into rubble. Those beautiful spires that you used to see there, they were most beautiful in the world, they say, are lying in heaps of rubble, blasted to smithereens. It's time to end this bloodletting and restore peace, and I think we're going to do it. We've had some great conversations.
Is Trump going back on all his promises? What's going on here? This is really extraordinary. Well, is it? Because Trump has flipped the script many a time, actually, particularly on his own supporters. But when pressed, he is known to kind of do that. But what is it about Macron?
Including with Russia. Since my return to the White House, we've made more progress toward that goal in 1 month than occurred in the past 3 years. And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly. Last week, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff conducted successful talks in Saudi Arabia with the delegation from Russia, and I'd like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the King, Mohammed, great people. They're really working hard to get this done. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere because he's been very much involved right from the beginning in trying to get it over with, and we're going to get it done. I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important
Look
issues.
at
Chief among
Macron's body language. He's staring right over at Trump while he's reading this.
them is this is the right time. It may be the only time. You know, that's a very interesting and horrible situation, and that could evolve into a third world war. We're not going to let that happen. Should have never started, but it did. And what a mess, what a horrible, bloody mess. I'm also pleased that President Macron agrees that the cost and burden of securing the peace must be borne by the nations of Europe, not alone by the United States. And Europe must.
Well, here's the thing, folks. Trump's how he went into this was like to say, we're not going to send any more money. We're going to stop sending our money, and we need to get something out of it. That's how he went in. He didn't go into it as defend, the sovereignty of nations. So he's going to come back. But look, we're going to see Macron's comments too. But first of all, the U.S. has already spent what, 180 billion or something like that. Why would you come out of something when you're the one that put Putin on his knees? Why would you let him off the hook? And then just like, create a whole other reality. Like they started off in a different time. The Twilight Zone or something with their initial ideas about what could stop the war, give up land, we need our money back. But, this is ridiculous because what is a few more $1 billion at this point? And on top of it, Ukraine was already doing trade with the U.S. The Americans had businesses in Ukraine. So what is he talking about? We need some money out of it. It doesn't make any sense. He made that whole argument up. That whole argument is a straw man argument.
Take that central role in assuring long-term security of Ukraine, which they want to do. And that's not a very big step. The big step is what's going to happen over the next few weeks. The United States has put up far more aid for Ukraine than any other nation. Hundreds of billions of dollars. We've spent more than 300 billion, and Europe has spent about 100 billion. That's a big difference. And at some point we should equalize, but hopefully we won't have to worry about that. We have other things happening that maybe take that out of the realm of necessity.
And you hear that? That is a change in what he just said last week. But The U.S. has spent 100 and what does it say here? As of February 2025, the United States has allocated approximately 175 billion in aid related to Ukraine since the onset of the Russian full-scale invasion in February 2022. Of this total, around 106 billion has been directly specific specific or directed specifically to Ukrainian government. The remaining funds have been utilized for various U.S. activities associated with the conflict and the support of other affected countries in the region. The term military assistance has committed over 62 billion in security aid to Ukraine since February 2022. Um, that includes equipment such as aerial systems, rocket munitions, and maintenance programs. Additionally, the U.S. government has utilized 1.6 billion, so that's 63 billion now, right? Or 64 billion now to secure 4.8 billion loan through the World Bank Special Program for Ukraine, Moldova recovery, as well as 530 million loan through the World Bank Economic Resilience Action Program. All right, so it's important to note that while President Donald Trump has claimed that the U.S. has provided 350 billion in aid to Ukraine, official figures do not support that assertion. The approved aid stands at 175 billion, with 106 billion directly benefiting the Ukrainian government. So Trump, he keeps spreading these lies openly, but it doesn't matter because he's still backtracking. And on top of it, the U.S. was already getting money from Ukraine. The U.S. had businesses in Ukraine. So what is he talking about? He needs minerals. Ukraine was open to the U.S. in the first place. So it's only Trump that reneged on the deal. That's crazy. But now he's flipping. So let's check.
Given vast amounts of military aid and money in form of grants, much of Europe's contribution has been economic relief structured as loans for which they'll be repaid. Like the Europeans, I believe that taxpayers in the United States also deserve to recoup the colossal amounts of money that we've sent. The previous administration never even thought of that. They didn't think of a lot of things, like why did they let it start in the first place? That is why we must have an agreement with Ukraine on critical minerals and rare earths and various other things as security. And I think that that's happening. I think we've made a lot of progress. I had a report just given to me before walking in that we've made, Emmanuel, a great deal of progress toward getting that. I've been elected by the American people to restore common sense to Washington and indeed to the world. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest.
Look, um, this is the thing. Before 2022, over 26, over 2,600 companies have been founded by foreign citizens in Ukraine, right? American entrepreneurs account for 174 of these new enterprises, right? So, and then there's other things going on. What is this? Foreign direct investment and economic engagement. Right. So we've invested in sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, technology, and services. For instance, Horizon Capital, a USA private equity firm, has been actively investing in Ukraine companies, particularly in tech and IT sectors. Their involvement highlights the strategic interest and confidence American investors have had in Ukraine's market potential. So, and there's other stuff. So keep in mind, Trump doesn't say all that. All that was going on already in Ukraine before the invasion.
Interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace. My administration is making a decisive break with the foreign policy.
Okay, so he just said to Putin, he's telling Putin, stop the killing now. Look.
Best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best. We've made, Emmanuel, a great deal of progress toward getting that. I've been elected by the American people to restore common sense to Washington and indeed to the world. And I believe strongly that it's in the best interest of the United States, the best interest in Europe, the best interest of Ukraine, and indeed the best interest of Russia to stop the killing now and bring the world to peace. My administration is making a decisive break with the foreign policy failures of the past administration and, frankly, the past.
So, will Russia listen?
I ran against a very foolish foreign policy establishment, and their recklessness has led.
Oh, now he's going back to Biden again, you know. So everything he does is about Biden. There has to be something beyond what Biden did at some point.
To the death of many, many people. Under our administration, we're forging a new path that promotes peace around the world. And when I left office for the first administration, first term, we had no wars, we had no problems. We didn't have October 7th
Here we go with the lies again.
with Israel. We didn't have Russia and Ukraine going at it. We didn't have the problems in other parts of the Middle East. We didn't have inflation. It was a whole different world. And you know what else we didn't have? Millions of people pouring through our borders, many of them criminals released from other nations and put right into our land, murderers, drug dealers, gangs. We didn't have any of that. It's a different time, but now we have it and we're fixing it. We'll fix it all up. We'll get it done as quickly as possible. And we've made a great deal of progress. People are saying it was the.
He's talking about we didn't have wars. We didn't have those wars. Look, Donald Trump, 2017 to January 2021, the U.S. military was actively engaged in Somalia. The Trump administration significantly increased military operations in the region, primarily through airstrikes targeting the al-Shabaab insurgency. 2017, the U.S. and Somalia agreed to recruit, train, equip, and mentor 3,000 personnel for the Somali National Army Danab Brigade, an elite special operations unit. By late 2020, approximately 750 U.S. troops were stationed in Somalia, right? So, and that's just then. Now let's see. What about now, right? Despite troop withdrawal, U.S. military involvement continued through airstrike support. Okay, in February 2025, during Trump's second term, the U.S. conducted airstrikes against the Islamic State operatives in Somalia, Kalmasgad Mountains, resulting in multiple. See, so even under Trump, you see, so Trump is just a damn liar. He's just a liar, and everyone knows that, I guess, at this point. It's preaching to the choir, right? But it's necessary to point out the lies and give some alternative facts as well.
Best month for a president in our country's history. I hope that's right, but I feel it's right. We've done a lot of things in a very short period of time, 4 weeks. As I've said before, it's my hope that my greatest legacy, however, will be as a peacemaker and a unifier. I want to bring peace, not war. I thank President Macron for joining us today in this urgent work we're doing. We have some wonderful people up front right here that have worked so hard. Steve Witkoff, thank you very much. And Michael Waltz, thank you. Scott, thank you very much. And JD, thank you. They've really done a job. They worked very hard. It's a real passion to get this war ended. And I'd like to now we invite Emmanuel to say a few words, and then we'll take questions. And again, Emmanuel, it's a great honor to have you with us at the White House. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear Donald. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, je vais dire quelques.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be saying a few words in French. Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear Donald, for your hospitality and for this visit. As you mentioned, we have had the opportunity to meet over the past few years. Since your first term, we've been able to discuss matters in Paris and also here at the White House. And it has always been a great joy to do that. And I would like to commend you. And thank you Mr. President, for extending this friendship to France and taking part in the ceremony at Notre Dame that you mentioned before. It was a great honor for the French people to reopen the cathedral to the rest of the world, and your presence was a testament to that friendship. As the president said, this friendship dates back to the Revolutionary War, since the beginning of the United States, and whenever we've needed to, we've been able to come together and be on the right side. We've been able to be united to defend peace and sovereignty, namely in the two world wars that marked the 20th century, from Lafayette to Pershing, and the many Americans who landed on Omaha Beach. And we spoke earlier before, and you mentioned that one of those gentleman was able to visit you here, one of the veterans. This is part of history which puts us in the world that we are in today. And as the president just said, there are many challenges in this world. And over the past few days, we have one main objective, which is the geopolitical situation. Mr. President, I really wish to thank you for making changes to your schedule to meet with us so quickly. I think we've made very substantive steps forward during our discussions, and this is a major step in what we're experiencing today. We had a video conference with all of the G7 leaders, which was an opportunity for us to discuss this matter 3 days after the Russian war in Ukraine, and to express our support for President Zelensky to the Ukrainian people, but also to speak and share about our desire for a lasting peace. This is what we have spoken about very forcibly over the past few weeks. We thought that this war was only going to last a few weeks when it broke out in 2022. We admire greatly the courage of the Ukrainian people. And Mr. President,
For folks that have been following the situation in Palestine, also, actually, France, Macron, he stopped in aid to Israel, military aid to Israel, and now pretty much, I think all the French aid, their activity is just going to, I think, Palestinian refugees, this kind of thing. What does it say? They halted in 2024 October. President Emmanuel Macron called for a halt to arms deliveries to Israel, emphasizing a need for a political solution to the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and Lebanon. This marked a significant shift in France's stance amid to it, aiming to address the prolonged hostilities in the region. Yeah, so in contrast, France's humanitarian aid effort has been predominantly directed towards Palestinian territories. Yeah, just to, that those things intersect here. So,
and I wish to thank you for this. You mentioned that there are responsibilities on Europe's side, and indeed, we have invested 128 billion in aid to Ukraine and the Ukrainians. Ukraine has been able to hold the front of our collective security. It's fought over these past few years for its independence and for its sovereignty, but also for our collective security, because I think that no one in this room wants to live in a world where it's the law of the strongest and international borders can be violated from one day to the next by anyone. Over the past few hours, and as you mentioned this, Mr. President, we've been able to see a few things take shape. First of all, allow me to commend you on your decision to work with President Zelensky and to conclude this agreement that's so important for the U.S. and Ukraine on rare earths, critical minerals, but also having substantive conversations with President Zelensky during this key phase of achieving this deal, which is a major commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's very commendable. We also have a shared desire.
Trump is so transactional, you know, And this rare earth and minerals, he's so transactional. It's like, why wouldn't Ukraine work with the US or rare earths and minerals? It doesn't make any sense. His request, like, we need, it's obviously like he must be talking for himself personally. But even if it's that, that's what makes it so even more transactional. Um, you didn't even have he didn't even have to ask them for that. That was already trade is already a part of this dynamic, essentially, right? So yeah, I don't get it. I don't get Trump on that. But other diplomats take advantage of his statements like that. Look at
To
Macron. He made it seem like the rare earths and minerals, yeah, now you've won that. But he didn't win anything because the US was already going to get that. This is this guy, but it's a way of like pointing out how stupid Trump is,
build
really.
President Zelensky during this key phase of achieving this deal, which is a major commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, and I think that's very commendable. We also have a shared desire to build peace. We will have this responsibility. This is 10 years after the war started in Crimea, and then we saw the events in the Donbas region and along the northern part of the country. We want to save lives. We want to bring prisoners back and bring back families and children, because there's also humanitarian tragedy affecting the Ukrainian people. We had lengthy discussions with the president, and we spoke about our desire to bring an end to conflicts, to have a truce that is measurable, verifiable, and that enables negotiation of a lasting peace, where we will discuss not only Ukraine's reconstruction, its territories, but also the security guarantees, meaning maintaining peace over the long term. As I said to the president, we've experienced peace accords that were only ceasefires without ensuring security guarantees, Minsk 1 and 2. And we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I know that the president has expressed the desire to be a player for peace in the region. I've spoken with some 30 European leaders and allies in recent days. We want to bring together these allies rather, and share the same vision. This peace must not mean a surrender of Ukraine. It must not mean a ceasefire without guarantees. This peace must allow for Ukrainian sovereignty and allow Ukraine to negotiate with other stakeholders regarding the issues it affects, that affects it rather. But it is also a country in which we need to shoulder our responsibilities so that we ensure security and stability for Ukraine and for the entire region. And for us Europeans, this is an existential issue. We also spoke about these issues at length with the president. We've worked with President Zelensky and gotten to some of the details of the various phases of the negotiation. And we've also been able to speak about some of this work with our British partners to
While this is going on, uh, actually, French authorities have initiated investigations into Musk's social media platform, X, formerly Twitter, in February 2025. Just this month, Paris prosecutors opened a probe into alleged algorithmic distortions on the platform, following concerns that its operations might skew the democratic debate in France. And yeah, so they actually have an official. France warns Elon Musk over potential platform bans. Yeah, they may ban his entire platform, but let's
talk
listen more.
about deployments, to enable to speak about some of this work with our British partners, to talk about deployments of peace forces on Ukrainian soil, which are part of these security guarantees. Other countries are ready to join in this effort. Solidarity and support from the US will be crucial to this, and I thank you, Mr. President, for beginning to work with us on this issue and the agreement that you are preparing to sign with Ukraine and with all of these discussions we've had are very solid guarantees that we are understood and that we have the same wish, peace as soon as possible, lasting, solid peace for everyone. And the renewal of an international situation where we are all able to shoulder our responsibilities, Europeans shouldering their responsibilities alongside their American allies who will shoulder their own responsibilities. I also wanted to be very clear, Mr. President, about Europe's commitment. We have committed to building a lasting peace. As Europeans, we have committed to being stakeholders in these security guarantees. And we are also well aware that Europeans need to do more for security in Europe, for defense in Europe, and to more fairly share the security burden that your country's been carrying for so many years. Mr. President, you know how much friendship I show towards you and I have towards you since your first term. Europe is very clear-eyed about this. We know what we need to do as Europeans, given the threats surrounding us and the responsibilities that we must shoulder. We spoke about the Versailles Agenda, which allowed the Europeans to take a historic step and increase their investments. Europeans are ready to do even more and to go even farther. And several leaders said that to me before I came here to meet you. Mr. President, dear Donald, you spoke about this peace through strength. We fully share that because we must recognize the sacrifices made by the Ukrainian people and what we owe to them. The president and I also spoke about economic matters and our desire to see more prosperity in the United States and in Europe. We had discussions which will be carried on by our teams, our ministers and secretaries, to flesh out some of those ideas. But the idea is to have fair competition and no bias within competition between our industries. Now, the American and European economies are extremely intertwined. Some 1.5 billion.
Macron is just more informed, more articulate, and a better statesman. Trump doesn't bother to inform people of anything. He doesn't bring up it. I mean, he's also not an eloquent speaker, but also he tends to ramble more instead of get to the business of, laying out the information. So it's substantive to people. So people get something out of it,
In trade, a trillion rather, in goods and services.
And Macron. Anyway.
And I know you've spoken about wanting to look at the balance of payments. We also have a trade deficit. And I know that we need to look not only at goods, but also digital items and goods, which you export. And we want to make a sincere commitment towards fair competition where we have smooth trade and more investments. You already invest a great deal in France, and France is the fifth largest investor in the United States. And I would like to recognize here all of the American investors who announced investments, some $120 billion that were announced at the AI summit. This is our wish. We want to have more prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. We have a shared agenda in that regard. We also spoke about the Middle East, among other subjects. And here again, we have the same desire. We don't want to see Iran obtain nuclear weapons. We don't want, or rather, we want an approach with partners in the region that we can trust. Given Iran's nuclear activities, we want to limit its ballistic capabilities and avoid any type of regional destabilization. With respect to Syria and Iraq, we also share the same desire. We don't want to see Islamic terrorist groups resume any of their activities, because for some time our armies have very bravely been engaged in the Gulf, as you have led, and contributions have been significant and helped stability in the region. And I say this with great sincerity. France was affected
The Q&A is about to come up.
by a terrorist attack in 2015, which was linked to the terrorist activity in Syria, and we are in that region at your side to are working for their collective security, but I doing.
It's a little strange question because you ask whether or not we're going to, on behalf of the United States, contribute to Ukraine. I mean, we're in there for about $350 billion. I think that's a pretty big contribution. I do appreciate the first part of your question, however, because I think they've done an incredible job with the Cathedral of Notre Dame. I think the president has done. I know he headed it up, and I know how hard he worked, and it took
What about now, Pumpkin?
a period of time, but really not a long period of time, considering what that was. So delicate, so beautiful. And I was there and I saw the work, and I'm very good at construction. I know good construction. I know bad construction. They did a beautiful job, and this man has to be given a lot of credit for that. It's an incredible cathedral. Most people thought it couldn't be, and if it was, it would have to be built in a different form. And we didn't want to see a different form. We want to see the same form that you built. So I just want to congratulate you. That was an amazing job. I don't think you've gotten enough credit for it. Someday you will. Someday you will.
Thank you, Donald. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. To go back to your question, today's discussion showed several areas of progress. First, we have been working a great deal with President Zelensky to have a proposal that's acceptable to Ukraine. President Trump has confirmed that he will be meeting with President Zelensky very soon to finalize the agreement on critical minerals and rare earths and to speak together about that matter. That's a very important step forward. The second thing is that during our discussions, we were able to go into some of the details about the proposal that we have just made to have a truce, a peace, and be able to measure that and then structure our discussions on that basis. France and several other European countries, along with Ukraine, are hard at work to build this lasting peace with very specific points, including security guarantees, the territories that belong to Ukraine, the issue of reconstruction, the economy, and critical minerals. We've been able to go into the details of those proposals. The third area of progress, which really mark a turning point, is the fact that we were able to talk about the details of the security guarantees. And the president has shown this over the past few days, and he said so a moment ago. We want peace. He wants peace. We want peace swiftly, but we don't want an agreement that is weak. The fact that there are Europeans that are ready to engage, to provide for these security guarantees. And now there's a clear American message that the U.S., as an ally, is ready to provide that solidarity for that approach. That's a turning point in my view. And that is one of the great areas of progress that we've made during this trip and during this discussion. When it comes to troops, in the past, a year ago specifically, we saw a reason to talk about sending troops for strategic regions. Today, when we talk about troops, we're talking about sending them in after we've negotiated a lasting peace. And once we have that solid, lasting peace, that's part of an agreement signed by Ukraine, signed by Russia, and for which we will provide the guarantees, then at that point, and recently France has worked with the UK to provide its contributions. We've worked on plans, we've worked with our militaries, not to go to the front lines, not to go into occupied territories, but as a show of support to show that we have a negotiated peace signed by both sides, and that is a peace we will preserve. So these would be peaceful deployments of troops, not for combat. These would be deployments of an assurance force. They would be limited, but they show solidarity. I've also spoken with all of our allies, and there are European and non-European allies who are ready and willing to take part in that effort. Countries have helped Ukraine maintain its military capabilities in terms of the number of soldiers it has, equipment, whereas others have provided logistical support on the ground. The question is whether or in what form the U.S. will contribute. And during our discussions, and during the discussions with Russia, we've understood that this would be acceptable to Russia, and that's a very important area of progress. And that means that in this context, the Europeans will shoulder their part of the burden, their share of the burden. We have a strong alliance that we've built over the decades. We have our solidarity, and we have deterrence capacities. What does it mean? Would it be dangerous? If there is an agreement signed by Ukraine and Russia, thanks to the efforts of President Trump, and if we provide the guarantees and Russia violates the agreement, then it would be in conflict with everyone who is engaged in the peace process. And that it would be the guarantees and Russia violates the agreement, then it would be in conflict with everyone who is engaged in the peace process. And that is a change. That was something we did not see in the past. That's not what we saw in 2014. So that is the real change that we're marking. We have this deterrence capacity on the American side. We have the capacity for engagement on the European side, and that's something we're going to continue working on together. It's not dangerous, but it's credible. It's less dangerous than things that could happen in the long term. And I think this is what we need to do to ensure security. And I say this very clearly. We're also talking about security for Europeans. I've been saying this for weeks now. If we do not guarantee the security of this territory within Europe, then how can we guarantee our own security for one and all? We live just 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, and the Germans and Polish are even closer. So our collective security is important. We need to answer this call for Europeans to be more engaged and